The river of Alywana had once been the lifeblood of the land, a glittering serpent that wound through the heart of the valley, carrying the laughter of children and the chants of fishermen to every corner of the kingdom. Its water once shimmered like liquid silver, feeding the yam fields and giving the villagers a reason to sing at dawn. But now the serpent lay dead. The once gleaming surface had dulled into cracked mud, its stones dry and pale beneath a pitiless sun. The air carried no scent of water, only dust, thick, choking and desperate. It clung to the skin and the spirit alike, a constant reminder that something sacred had been taken away. The people of Alywana whispered that the gods had turned their backs, but others said something far worse, that the gods were waiting. Waiting for justice. Waiting for a voice buried too soon. The elders forbade anyone to speak her name after the river dried, yet her story flowed through the cracks of silence like trapped wind. Mara. The woman buried by the river's edge. The one whose eyes had once seen too much, whose heart had been pure enough to stir envy, whose death had cursed the flow of life itself. The village was suffocating. Crops withered in the fields, their roots clawing the dirt for water that no longer came. The plantain trees stood skeletal, and the cassava leaves curled like dying tongues. The fishermen abandoned their canoes, which now rested uselessly on the parched bed. Children no longer played near the riverbanks. Instead they followed their mothers to the shrines, where prayers turned into tears that could not fill even a gourd. Goats bleated weakly, and the smell of decay crept through the air. Fish that had once danced in the current now lay rotting, their silver scales glinting like lost souls under the merciless sun. Each morning the elders gathered beneath the baobab tree at the village square, their faces carved with worry. Chief Adamu's once commanding voice had grown frail as he addressed the council. "The gods are angry," he rasped, clutching his staff. "The river has not flowed for 7 moons. If we do not appease them soon, Alywana will perish." The others nodded, murmuring to one another, but none dared say what they all feared, that this was not the wrath of the gods, but the vengeance of a woman wronged. Night brought no comfort. The villagers heard whispers along the dry riverbed, a strange sighing that rose with the wind. Some swore they saw ripples move across the cracked earth, as if invisible hands were brushing against it. Old Mama Ife, the oldest woman in the village, would not sleep at night. She sat by her hut, muttering prayers, her blind eyes fixed toward the river. She was not meant to rest there, she told anyone who would listen. The river rejects the innocent. It remembers. The king's messengers had come once, promising help, but they never returned. The roads had become treacherous, as if the land itself was folding in on its grief. The few travelers who passed through spoke of dark omens, of thunder that rumbled without rain, of birds falling from the sky, of shadows that gathered by the river's edge at dusk. Still, the people of Alywana clung to hope, though their voices trembled each time they looked toward the horizon. Amara's grave lay near the bend where the river used to sing the loudest. Now it was only a mound of hard, cracked earth marked by a single wooden stake, its carvings worn away by time. The air around it felt heavy, thicker somehow, as though it resisted the living. Even the wind hesitated to pass there. Yet sometimes, late at night, those who ventured too close claimed to hear the sound of running water, faint, sorrowful, as though the river was trying to remember itself. The children of the village, curious and fearless, would dare each other to approach her grave. One night little Tund went too near. When he came back his voice trembled. "I saw her shadow," he whispered. "It moved beneath the ground." His mother slapped him for speaking such things, but her hands shook as she did it. In her heart she knew the child had not lied. Priests were called from neighboring lands, offering sacrifices and chants. Goats were slaughtered, blood poured where water once flowed, yet the river remained dry, unmoved, unyielding. Each ritual failed, and each failure deepened the fear that something greater than gods was at work. The earth seemed to throb beneath their feet as if the land itself grieved. There were nights when the moon cast a strange glow over the village, turning everything pale and ghostly. On those nights the silence was unbearable. No owls hooted, no insects sang. The villagers locked their doors, but still they heard it, a faint weeping carried on the wind, rising from the riverbed. It was soft, distant, almost human. And when it stopped, the air itself seemed to hold its breath. Some said the tears of the living were not enough to call the river back. Only one tear mattered, the tear of the one who had been wronged. And until that tear was shed again, the water would not flow, the fields would not bloom, and the gods would not speak. The people began to leave offerings at Amara's grave, bowls of grain, beads, even their last drops of water. But the earth swallowed it all and gave nothing in return. The kingdom of Alywana stood on the edge of ruin, its people trapped between guilt and silence. They spoke of the past in whispers, of a day when the river ran red and the sun refused to set. They spoke of Amara, though none dared say her name aloud after sunset. For they believed that the moment her name was spoken under the moonlight, something beneath the soil would stir, and the river would remember its promise. But deep beneath the dry earth, where the last drop of water slept, something already had. Before the river turned to dust, before the silence swallowed the laughter of the villagers, there was Amara, the woman of the riverbank. Her hut stood where the palms bent low to kiss the water, and her laughter carried across the rippling surface like a blessing. She was neither rich nor noble, but her hands were gifted with the kind of power that came from compassion, not charms. Amara healed with herbs, with warmth, and with words that soothed pain as though the gods themselves had whispered through her lips. Mothers brought her their fevered children, farmers their wounded hands, and even the weary hunters who returned from the forest sought her touch when their spirits were heavy. It was said that when Amara bathed in the river, the fish gathered around her ankles and the lilies opened their petals as if listening. The people of Leone called her the river's daughter, for she carried peace wherever she walked. But not all hearts in the village rejoiced in her grace. Lady Kelechi, the chief's wife, watched Amara with eyes sharpened by envy. Where Amara's presence brought comfort, Kelechi's brought unease. She was beautiful, adorned with coral beads and gold bangles that chimed when she moved, yet inside her beauty coiled jealousy like a snake under silk. It began the day the royal child, Kelechi's only son, fell ill. The boy's breath grew shallow, his cries fading into weak murmurs as the healers of the palace failed to cure him. In desperation, Kelechi sent for Amara. When the young woman arrived, she bowed low, her bare feet dusted with river sand, and laid her hand gently upon the child's brow. "He will live," Amara said softly. "But he must rest beneath the morning sun, and his spirit must drink from clean water." Her voice was calm, her confidence unwavering. And as she promised, by dawn the child's breathing steadied. His color returned. For a while the village rejoiced, but jealousy grows even in gratitude. Rumors began to spread like smoke, that Amara had spoken too surely, that she had known too much. Some said she had made the boy sick just to heal him, that her powers came from the dark spirits of the river. Kelechi listened to the whispers and let them bloom in her mind until they rooted deep. She began to dream of Amara's laughter echoing through her husband's hall, of her beauty catching the chief's gaze, of her name whispered in reverence where Kelechi should have been. One night, under the red moon, Kelechi visited the shrine of the ancestors. There, she found the old priestess hunched over the ashes of burnt offerings. "Mother of Alyawana," Kelechi said, her voice trembling with false humility, "there is witchcraft among us. The gods are angry. The river's daughter defies their order." The priestess looked up with weary eyes, uncertain whether to believe. But Kelechi pressed on, spinning lies like silk, that Amara's herbs were mixed with blood, that her songs were incantations, that she had seduced the river spirits to gain her power. By dawn, the rumor had become a decree. The chief summoned Amara to stand before the council. She came without fear, dressed in white linen, her hair braided simply, her eyes calm. "You are accused of witchcraft," the chief declared. "The child you healed now burns again with fever. The gods demand an offering, and your name has been spoken." A murmur rippled through the crowd, disbelief mixed with dread. Amara looked at them all, the same faces she had once helped, and saw only fear in their eyes. "I have never served darkness," she said, her voice steady. "If the river knows my heart, let it speak for me." But no one dared meet her gaze. Fear of divine wrath is stronger than gratitude. And so the council condemned her, not because they believed she was guilty, but because they needed someone to bear the weight of their fear. That evening, they led her to the riverbank where the earth was still soft from the recent rains. The villagers gathered, torches flickering like restless spirits. The priest beat his drum slowly, a sound that throbbed in every chest. Kelechi stood near the water, draped in mourning cloth though her eyes shone with victory. "May this offering cleanse our land," she intoned. "May the gods forgive us." Amara did not cry. She knelt by the edge of the pit they had dug, her hands tied, her face turned toward the dying sun. The air smelled of wet clay and betrayal. "The river has always spoken truth," she said quietly. "And truth cannot stay buried." Some swore that at that moment the wind stopped, and the water behind her rippled though no stone had fallen. They placed her in the earth, covering her slowly as the chants rose. When the soil reached her lips, she whispered her final words, words that carried through the silence like a promise. "When the water weeps, remember me." The ground trembled once, just once, as though the river itself shuddered. Then all was still. The villagers left, uneasy and quiet, their torches flickering in the wind. Only Kalechi lingered, staring at the mound that now marked the end of her envy. But as she turned away, a drop of water slipped from the sky, though the heavens were clear. It fell upon the grave, sinking into the soil as if claimed. By the next morning, the river had begun to retreat. Its flow slowed, then stilled, and within days it was gone. The fish lay gasping, the reeds bowed, and the land grew thirsty. The villagers cried to the gods, but the gods were silent. For what they had buried was not a witch, but innocence, and the river, in its grief, had chosen to mourn. That night, as the last shovel of earth covered Amara's grave, the heavens trembled. The air grew heavy, pressing down on the shoulders of those who had gathered to watch her burial. The priest's final chant faded into the wind, but the silence that followed was worse than any curse. Clouds thickened above Alyawana, rolling in from the mountains like wounded beasts. The villagers hurried back to their homes, clutching their charms and muttering prayers. Only Lady Kalechi lingered by the riverbank, her face pale in the gathering storm, her heart caught between triumph and terror. When the first thunderclap tore through the sky, it did not sound like thunder at all, it sounded like a cry. A long, echoing wail that rolled across the valley, shaking huts and rattling windows. The people of Alyawana froze in their homes, whispering Amara's name under their breath even though they had sworn never to speak it again. The elders said the gods were claiming her soul, but the young ones who peered through cracks in their walls swore they saw light, a strange golden light, blooming along the riverbed like the glow of 1,000 fireflies. Then without warning the rain began to fall. But it wasn't rain as the people knew it. The drops were heavy, slow, and strangely warm, as though the sky itself wept tears instead of water. When they touched the river, something impossible happened. The flow stopped. The great river of Alyawana, which had run unbroken since the time of their ancestors, froze midstream. Water hung in motion, ripples frozen like glass, reflecting the flashes of lightning in eerie stillness. The villagers gasped and fell to their knees. "The gods have cursed us," they cried. But an old woman, her voice trembling, whispered, "No, this is not the work of gods. This is her cry." In that moment, as lightning flashed across the sky, they heard it, faint but unmistakable. A scream. It rose from the riverbank, sharp and desperate, cutting through the roar of the storm. It was not a sound of anger, but of sorrow so deep it made the air itself ache. Those who heard it swore they would never forget it. It was the voice of a woman betrayed, echoing through the still water, carried by the thunder to every corner of the land. The next morning the sun rose over a changed world. The river had not moved an inch. The surface shone like polished stone, reflecting the clouds above. Birds circled but did not land. Fishermen who dared approach found that their nets could not sink. The water refused to part for them. When they touched it, it was cold as stone and smooth as glass. One of them, a young man named Duro, whispered, "It feels like she's holding it still." At first, the elders forbade anyone from speaking of it, declaring the event divine punishment. But whispers have a way of flowing even when rivers do not. The children claimed they saw shapes beneath the surface, long hair drifting like smoke, hands reaching upward, eyes that glowed faintly beneath the frozen current. At night, strange sounds began to rise from the banks, soft murmurs, half-sung, half-spoken, like a lullaby twisted into a warning. The first to hear her clearly was Mama Ife, the blind woman who lived nearest the river. She said the voice came to her in the middle of the night, calling her name from beyond the dry reeds. "It was her," she said, trembling the next morning. "She said she cannot rest. She said the truth lies buried deeper than her body." The others told her to keep silent, but her words spread faster than wind. Soon, everyone in Alyawana knew, Amara's spirit had not left. The river itself had become her voice. Each night after that, the villagers would hear faint whispers riding on the wind. Some heard her humming the same songs she used to sing while fetching water. Others swore she called out to the children she had helped bring into the world. But there was one sound all agreed upon, a low rhythmic pulse that echoed like a heartbeat beneath the earth. It came from the direction of her grave. Lady Kalechi could not sleep. She began to wake in the middle of the night drenched in sweat, convinced she heard footsteps outside her window. Once, she saw the reflection of her own face in her basin of water, but behind it, faintly, another face shimmered. Amara's. Her mouth was moving but no sound came out. Kalechi smashed the basin to the floor, but the water kept whispering her name until dawn. Fear turned the village restless. Livestock refused to drink from the river. The crops that grew near its bank withered faster than others as if poisoned by guilt. Children cried in their sleep, saying they dreamed of a woman standing knee-deep in water, her arms stretched toward the sky, her lips moving in prayer. "She's asking for truth," one boy sobbed. "She says the river won't move until she's heard." The chief, desperate and afraid, called for new priests. They came with drums and incense, chanting to banish her spirit. But each chant was swallowed by the wind before it reached the river. One priest cast a calabash of sacred oil upon the frozen water. It floated for a moment, then sank slowly through the still surface as if being pulled downward by unseen hands. The priests fled that night, leaving their charms behind. Days passed, then weeks. The air grew heavy with dread. The villagers avoided the river, but they could not escape its silence. It watched them, it weighed upon them. When they looked at the unmoving water, they saw their own faces twisted with guilt. And sometimes in the reflection they saw her too, her eyes open beneath the surface, her lips parting just enough to form the words that haunted them all. "The river remembers." It was Mama Ife again who finally dared to answer the whispers. She hobbled to the riverbank one night and knelt beside the still water. "Amara," she said softly, her voice shaking. "We were afraid. Forgive us. Tell us what you seek." For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, from beneath the frozen current, came a ripple, the first movement since the night she was buried. The surface trembled and a faint voice rose, clear as wind through reeds. "When truth is buried," it said, "the river cannot flow." The next morning, the villagers found Mama Ife lying by the water, her face calm, her hand outstretched as if she had touched something divine. The river was still unmoving, but where her hand had rested, the ice had melted into a single drop, glimmering in the sun. Years passed, and the curse of silence that began with Amara's death spread far beyond the borders of Aluwana. The once rich farmlands of the kingdom shriveled into dust, and the air itself seemed to thirst. Rivers that had once fed the people turned into winding scars across the earth, and the great river Olu, the lifeline of the land, remained lifeless, a ghost of what it had been. The kingdom's drums no longer echoed with joy but with desperation. Children were born under skies that never rained, and every breath of wind carried dust instead of hope. The elders had grown old waiting for forgiveness that never came. They had sacrificed goats, burned incense, and offered their tears to the gods, but still the land refused to heal. It was as if the very soul of the kingdom had been buried with Amara, and no prayer could reach where her spirit slept. And yet, one night, beneath a sky split by a dying moon, a new voice began to hear her calling. Her name was Nia, a girl of barely 16 summers, slender and bright-eyed, born in a time when children had forgotten the sound of flowing water. Her mother often told her stories of the river that once sang at dawn, though even her mother's memory was fading, the image blurred by years of drought. But Nia dreamed vividly. Night after night, she saw a woman standing knee-deep in glimmering water, her skin glowing faintly like moonlight through mist, her hair entwined with strands of green riverweed. The woman's eyes were both sorrowful and kind, and each time Nia reached toward her, the dream dissolved into water and silence. At first she thought it was nothing more than hunger playing tricks on her mind. The drought had taken everything, their crops, their animals, even the patience of the people. But the dreams persisted, becoming clearer, more insistent. The woman began to speak. Her voice was soft, like the rustle of reeds, and her words were always the same: "Find me where the river sleeps." One night, when the wind carried the scent of dry earth and the moon burned red, Nia woke with her heart pounding. She knew she could not ignore the voice any longer. Taking a clay lamp and a small pouch of salt for protection, she slipped out of her hut. The village slept in uneasy silence. Only the cries of restless birds echoed in the distance. Her feet carried her through the fields of cracked soil until she reached the place where the river once ran. The sight before her was haunting. The riverbed stretched wide and barren, the moonlight revealing fissures in the earth deep enough to swallow a man. Bones of fish lay scattered like pale relics, and the air was still, heavy, suffocating. She knelt, pressing her ear to the ground, half expecting to hear nothing but the heartbeat of silence. But instead, faintly, she heard a sound, like the murmur of distant water. Drawn by it, she walked along the dry channel, the lamp trembling in her hands. The wind picked up, whispering through the reeds that had somehow managed to survive. And then she saw it, near the old bend of the river where the story said Amara had been buried. The soil there shimmered faintly beneath the moonlight, as though something beneath it breathed. The glow was pale at first, almost imperceptible, but the closer Nia stepped, the stronger it grew, a soft, pulsing light that seemed alive. Her breath caught in her throat, The ground beneath her feet was warm, impossibly so. She dropped to her knees and brushed away the dry dirt. The faint glow spilled through the cracks like golden veins beneath the earth. "Who are you?" Nia whispered, though in her heart she already knew. The voice from her dreams stirred again, surrounding her in the still air. "You have come. I have waited." The light flared suddenly, spreading across the soil in intricate patterns that resembled river currents. For a heartbeat, Nia thought she heard the rush of flowing water, not around her but inside her, in her veins, her pulse, her breath. She closed her eyes and in that moment the world shifted. She saw visions, flashes of a woman standing before a crowd, her hands bound, her face serene as the earth swallowed her. She felt the pain of betrayal, the weight of silence, and the deep, enduring sorrow of being forgotten. When she opened her eyes, tears streamed down her face. "Amara," she whispered, the name tasting like both fear and reverence. The air trembled at the sound, as though the land itself had waited years to hear it spoken aloud again. The wind rose, sweeping through the dead reeds, making them hiss like voices murmuring prayers. Beneath Nia's hands the glow spread wider, outlining the shape of a grave long lost to time. The light began to pulse faster, each throb syncing with Nia's heartbeat. Her lamp flickered, its flame bending toward the earth as if drawn to it. The whispers grew louder now, forming fragments of words carried on the wind. Truth, justice, river. Nia's hair whipped around her face as she leaned closer, unable to tear her eyes away. Suddenly the ground gave a small shudder. Dust rose in a slow spiral, circling her like a spirit. Nia gasped but did not move. The glow was no longer just beneath the soil, it now emanated from within her. Her hands, her chest, her tears. She felt warmth spreading through her body, gentle but powerful, as though the river itself flowed through her veins. Then came the voice again, clearer this time, both human and divine. "You are my witness. The river cannot flow until truth returns." The light dimmed gradually, fading back into the cracks of the earth. The night fell silent again and the air cooled. Nia knelt there for a long time, her breath uneven, her heart racing. When she finally rose, the soil beneath her feet had changed, soft, dark, alive. Where she had touched the ground, a thin trickle of water glistened briefly before disappearing into the dust. When Nia returned to the village before dawn, her mother saw her trembling form and cried out in fear. "Where have you been, child?" she demanded. Nia could not answer. Her lips were dry, her voice lost. But when her mother touched her forehead, she flinched. Nia's skin was cold and damp, as though she had just stepped out of a river. Outside the wind stirred once more. From afar, those who lived near the dead river swore they heard a faint sound, the echo of flowing water. It lasted only a few breaths, but it was enough to stir the memory of what once was. And somewhere beneath the cracked soil of Alyawana, a woman wrapped in riverweed smiled in her sleep. That night, as the moon hung low over Alyawana, Nia sat by the cracked earth of the riverbank, her bare feet pressing into the dust that once glistened with life. She heard it again, that voice beneath the water, soft as breath, yet carrying the weight of centuries. "The truth," it whispered, "lies where lies were born." It wasn't just an echo in her mind, it was alive, pulsing beneath the ground, moving with purpose. She placed her palm against the faintly glowing soil, and warmth spread through her body, as though the river itself recognized her. The voice called her by name, and for a moment she felt the faint touch of cool fingers brushing hers from beneath the earth. Over the next days, Nia could no longer silence the whispers. They followed her through the village, in the creak of doors, the rustle of dry leaves, the hollow sound of the wind through the empty wells. She began to see visions. Amara, the healer with kind eyes, walking through the old marketplace, her hands glowing with soft blue light as she healed the sick. The people loved her once, Nia realized, but fear had turned their hearts cold. The chief's wife, Lady Kalechi, had worn white robes and tears of false sorrow when Amara was condemned. In Nia's visions she saw the night of betrayal, Kalechi standing before the chief, crying out that Amara's herbs had cursed the royal child, while her own trembling hands hid a vial of poison. Each time Nia saw this, she woke drenched in sweat, her heart pounding. The voice beneath the water grew stronger, guiding her steps. One evening, it led her to the old shrine near the river's edge, the same place where the elders had performed Amara's sentencing. The shrine was overgrown now, strangled by vines, but Nia could still smell the faint trace of smoke and blood. Kneeling there, she whispered, "Amara, what do you want me to do?" The river's voice replied, deep and calm, "Bring light where shadows have long feasted." That night, the drought seemed to tighten its grip on the village. Children coughed in their sleep, Animals died by the roadside, and even the chief's household grew desperate. Kalechi, still adorned in gold and arrogance, ordered more sacrifices to the gods, but the sky remained merciless. Yet in the midst of this suffering, Nia's resolve burned brighter. She gathered the villagers and spoke of the dreams, of the truth buried beneath their feet. Many called her mad, but others, the old and the poor who remembered Amara's kindness, followed her to the riverbank, hope flickering in their tired eyes. As they stood in silence, Nia raised her hands. The ground trembled beneath her, and the faint sound of water moving below echoed like distant thunder. Amara was no witch, Nia cried. She was your healer, your sister, your protector. The river has not forgotten, and neither should we. Her voice broke through years of silence, cutting through fear. Then, before everyone's eyes, the soil at Amara's grave began to glow, cracks forming in radiant blue lines that pulsed like veins of light. From the earth rose a soft mist that smelled of rain. Within it, a shape formed, the silhouette of Amara, her eyes luminous, her hair flowing like ripples of water. She looked at Nia, and though her lips did not move, the voice spoke clearly in every heart present. Justice has a voice. Let it be heard. At that moment, Nia felt truth sear through her like fire. She saw every lie, every moment of betrayal, Kalechi pouring poison into the royal child's milk, her trembling hands burying the empty vial near Amara's hut, her fearful eyes watching as the healer was dragged away. The vision ended, but the proof remained. Nia ran to the hut that had belonged to Amara and began to dig where the spirit had shown her. The villagers watched as she unearthed the broken vial, still carrying the faint scent of poison. Gasps filled the air. No one spoke, not until Kalechi herself appeared, her face pale, her breath uneven. She saw the vial, saw the gathered eyes, and for the first time her voice faltered. She knew too much, she stammered, tears mixing with dust on her cheeks. If I hadn't, she never finished. The ground beneath her feet cracked open, and a thin stream of water burst forth, soaking her robes. The villagers backed away as the stream thickened, rising higher, swirling around Nia's ankles like a living thing. Amara's spirit shone brighter, and her voice filled the air one last time. Let the river remember. And it did. Water surged upward, breaking through the earth with a mighty roar, flowing clear and strong for the first time in years. The drought broke that night. Rain poured from the heavens, drenching the cursed land, washing away the dust of lies. Nia stood beneath it, her eyes closed, feeling the spirit's warmth fade into peace. Amara's figure dissolved into the mist, leaving only ripples that danced in gratitude. When morning came, the river flowed freely once more. The villagers called it Odo Amara, the river of truth. And though Kalechi's name was never spoken again, her empty palace stood as a warning to all who would twist truth for power. Nia became the new guardian of the river, listening to its whispers, carrying forward the vow she made beneath the rain, that truth, once awakened, will never drown again. The morning sun rose pale and weak over Alyawana, its light dimmed by clouds that threatened rain. The river had begun to stir again, its voice whispering just beneath the surface, calling for justice. Nia stood at its edge, her bare feet pressed into the soft, damp earth that had once been a grave. Around her gathered the elders, men and women who once bowed to fear and superstition, now trembling with guilt and uncertainty. Word had spread through the village like fire in dry grass. The young girl who heard the river's voice had summoned a trial, and the gods themselves would witness it. Lady Kalechi arrived last, carried in by servants beneath a canopy of woven palm leaves, her face painted in defiance. Though her silks shimmered, her eyes betrayed exhaustion, red-rimmed and restless from nights without sleep. Whispers followed her. Some said her dreams had been haunted by a woman dripping with water, others that her mirror no longer showed her reflection. Still, she stood tall, clutching her staff as if power alone could keep her steady. Nia stepped forward. Her voice was clear, unshaken. Lady Kalechi, she began, before this river and before these people, I ask you, did you poison the royal child? Did you send an innocent woman to her death to hide your guilt? The murmurs of the crowd grew into a hum, low and nervous. Kalechi scoffed, her gold bracelets jingling. You are but a child, she said, her voice sharp. You play with ghosts and think yourself a prophet. The river flows again, is that not proof the gods are satisfied? Nia did not move. The gods are not satisfied, she said softly, until truth is spoken. She turned to the elders. You watched Amara die. You called her witch, you buried her alive. But her spirit has returned, not for revenge but for justice. As her words faded, the wind shifted. The river's surface rippled though no breeze touched it. The ground beneath their feet trembled faintly. Villagers gasped as a faint mist began to rise from the water, coiling upward like smoke. The elders clutched their staffs, whispering prayers. Kalechi took a step back, her eyes darting to the river. "This is madness," she hissed. "You summon tricks to frighten the weak." But then the tremor deepened. The earth groaned. The water at the riverbank began to bubble, glowing faintly with blue light. And from its depths, a shape emerged, tall, graceful and terrible in its beauty. Amara's form rose, her skin shimmering like moonlit water, her eyes pools of liquid silver. The villagers fell to their knees, some weeping, others unable to breathe. Only Nia stood, her hands clasped before her heart. "Amara," she whispered, her voice trembling with reverence. The spirit's voice filled the air, not with sound but with presence. "You buried truth beneath stone and silence. It echoed within every heart. Now truth rises unbound." The water around her feet spread outward, reaching toward Kalechi, who stumbled backward. But when her heel touched the damp soil, the ground shuddered violently. Cracks split the earth in a wide circle and steam hissed upward. Amara's eyes turned to her. "Do you deny me still, Lady Kalechi?" Kalechi tried to speak, but her voice faltered. You were a curse upon us. The child, he would have died anyway. You meddled with things beyond your place." Amara's gaze darkened. The river behind her surged high, roaring as if the heavens themselves protested the lie. Nia stepped closer, her eyes burning with resolve. "The river knows truth," she said. "It carries every memory, every sin. You cannot wash yourself clean when the water remembers." The air thickened with tension. Villagers shouted for her to confess, but Kalechi's pride held her tongue still. Then with a sudden crack, lightning split the sky. A heavy drop of rain fell, then another, then dozens until the storm broke in full. The rain poured down, soaking them all. Yet even through the storm, Amara's figure remained dry, glowing brighter than the lightning. Kalechi fell to her knees, her voice breaking into sobs. "I did it," she screamed. "I poisoned the child. I wanted to save my place beside the chief. He said he would cast me out. He said I had no worth if the heir died. I thought if she was gone, the gods would forgive me." Her cries echoed against the river's roar. The villagers stared, some horrified, some furious. One of the elders dropped his staff into the mud and began to weep. "We killed her," he whispered. "We killed Amara for a lie." Amara looked down at Kalechi, her expression neither cruel nor kind, only vast, as if she had become part of the river itself. "Justice is not vengeance," she said, her voice soft now. "It is the return of balance." The water rose around Kalechi, swirling in tight circles. She screamed and tried to crawl away, but the current pulled her in, wrapping her in a shimmering cocoon of light. Nia watched, her heart heavy yet calm. The storm raged, thunder rolling across the skies, but the people did not flee. They stood and watched as the river delivered its verdict. When the light faded, Kalechi was gone. In her place, a single lotus flower floated upon the water, glowing faintly with gold at its center. The storm began to ease. Rain softened to drizzle, then stopped entirely. The river flowed steady and clear, washing away the stains of years gone by. Amara turned to Nia one last time. "The truth needed a voice," she said, "and you answered." Her form began to dissolve into mist, her light scattering across the water. "Remember, child, justice is not born of anger but of remembrance. Let them never forget." Then she was gone. The elders bowed low. One by one the villagers knelt, pressing their hands into the wet earth. "Forgive us," they murmured to the river. "Forgive us and flow forever." As dawn broke the next day, the water of Aluana sparkled under the new sun. The drought was over. Fish returned to the currents, crops sprouted anew, and the air smelled of clean rain and redemption. Nia stood alone at the river's edge, watching the lotus drift downstream. She knew the river would never be silent again. It had found its voice, and in its song, truth lived eternal. The sky cracked open like an ancient wound, and the river roared to life with the fury of long-silenced gods. Villagers screamed as the ground trembled beneath their feet, yet none dared flee, for standing at the river's edge was Lady Kalechi, her fine garments soaked, her voice torn with desperate confession. "I did it," she cried, her words broken by sobs. "I poisoned the child. I accused Amara to save myself." Her knees struck the mud, and her gold bangles slid down her arms, swallowed by the rising water. "I lied before the gods. I lied before my husband. I buried innocence to protect my name." The river surged higher, lapping against her thighs. It shimmered not with destruction but with light, a divine blinding brilliance that turned every drop into molten gold. Nia stood nearby, clutching her chest as she watched the water move like a living thing, spiraling around Kalechi as though judging her with unseen eyes. All around, the villagers knelt, pressing their foreheads into the soaked earth. The rain no longer felt cold. It felt warm, alive, pulsing with the heartbeat of the river itself. The wind howled through the palm trees, bending them low, whispering Amara's name through the leaves. Kalechi's cries grew weaker, each confession dragged from her like blood from an open wound. "The gods warned me," she gasped, trembling. "Amara begged me to tell the truth. I saw the sickness in my son's eyes and blamed her. I thought if she died, my guilt would die too." Lightning flared across the sky, illuminating the river in silver fire. From the center of its current, something rose, not a figure this time, but a vast wave shaped like outstretched hands. It moved toward Kalechi not to strike but to lift. The water cradled her, surrounding her with light so fierce it blinded everyone who dared look. Her sobs turned to gasps and her voice faded into the roar. The chief, old and broken, stumbled forward from the gathered crowd. His robes were torn, his crown hanging crookedly. His eyes were red with tears, his body heavy with years of pride and silence. "Kalechi," he cried out, his voice trembling, "my wife, what have we done?" He fell to his knees beside her as the river rose around them. "I believed you," he whispered, choking on guilt. "I ordered her death. I let the drums sound when she screamed beneath the earth. And all this time I thought the gods punished us for her sin, but it was mine." The river responded with a low, thunderous sound as though mourning. A wave broke against the chief's body, coating him in shimmering droplets. He reached toward the glowing water where Kalechi had stood moments ago, but she was gone, vanished within the current like a secret finally set free. The elders shouted for the people to move to higher ground, but Nia shook her head. "Do not run," she said softly, her voice filled with calm authority beyond her years. "This water does not come to destroy. It comes to cleanse." And she was right. The flood swept through the village, yet it did not tear homes apart or drag bodies downstream. It moved with strange gentleness, seeping into the soil, washing away rot and dust, polishing stones that had been dulled by decades of drought. The villagers felt its warmth, its life, its forgiveness. It cleansed their hands, their hearts, and their memories. As the water spread, it touched the chief's feet. He gasped as if struck by lightning, clutching his chest. His breath grew short, his face pale. "Forgive me, Amara," he murmured. "Forgive me for being blind." His body shuddered once, then fell still. His crown slipped into the water, carried away like a leaf in the current. The villagers watched in silence. Some wept openly. Others simply bowed their heads, realizing that justice had found its way not through sword or fire, but through truth. The river's roar softened to a murmur. From the depths, the faint outline of a woman appeared once more, Amara, serene and luminous, her hair flowing like liquid silver. She hovered above the water, her expression neither wrathful nor sorrowful, only peaceful. Her spirit drifted downstream, her form fading slowly into mist. Wherever her light passed, the land revived. Flowers bloomed from the mud, trees lifted their branches, and fish leapt joyfully in the renewed river. Nia followed the spirit's glow until it disappeared beyond the bend. She felt tears on her face, not from grief but from awe. The air smelled of life again, rich and clean. The once cracked riverbeds glistened with smooth currents, reflecting the first true dawn Alyawana had seen in years. As the villagers began to rebuild their homes, they found relics from the flood. Amara's old clay bowl, her woven charm of river reeds, and beneath a tree her healer's staff, unbroken. They carried them to the riverbank, laying them upon a stone altar. An elder spoke, his voice trembling. "This river remembers truth. It punishes lies not with death, but with memory. May we never forget her name." Nia stepped forward, placing a lotus blossom, the same that had appeared the night before, upon the altar. "Amara walks with the water," she said softly, "and the water walks with us." The villagers nodded, their eyes glistening. Together they dipped their hands into the flowing river, marking their foreheads with droplets that shimmered faintly like liquid gold. From that day the people of Alyawana built their homes farther from the banks, leaving the land around the river untouched. They called it Ebe Amara, the river that speaks. Once a year, when the rains returned, they gathered to offer songs and petals to the current, thanking it for truth, for mercy, and for the woman who had become its spirit. At night, when the moonlight touched the water just right, They said you could still see her reflection drifting along the current, not as a ghost but as a guardian. Her song, soft as ripples and ancient as dawn, whispered through the reeds. The water remembers the truth forgotten by men. And beneath that endless melody, the river of Aluwana flowed, never again silent, never again still. It carried the past, the present, and the promise that justice, once awakened, would never drown.